Time for me to look at this shutter and lens assembly here. Now the first thing I noticed, that the lens is very dirty. That's the front surface. The rear surface is quite dirty too, and I can see some stuff on the inside of the rear lens group. So I'm going to have a go at cleaning that lens first, just to get an impression of how good or bad it is. So I'm very lightly going over this with a cotton bud moistened with glass cleaner, and really I just want to lift off any loose dust and dirt, and there's plenty of it. And I rotate the cotton bud as I go to present a fresh surface to the lens, so that I'm not dragging any grit with me. This is a Rodenstock halogen lens. I just ran round the name ring there to ensure that I've picked up any dust and rubbish. And the cotton bud's still coming off quite dirty, running right round that inside of that filter thread. The lens is looking much improved. I can see some marks in the coating. At least that's what it appears to be at the moment. The lens is much better than it was. I'll do the same for the rear group. The rear lens should be in better condition, of course, because it hasn't been open for fingers to be poking at anywhere near as often. And I can see some marks there, look like marks in the coating. And I can see fungus on an inside surface. So I'm going to remove that rear lens group now. I'll clean the inner surface, or the innermost surface. I'll hold that up to the light. That fungus is certainly gone that I could see. There are still marks there. I can remove the rearmost element here. There's some marks look like they're in the rear element. They may be on the underside surface of this piece, and potentially if I can remove the rear element, I'll be able to get to those, get it out, clean it. Those marks may go away. The pattern of them is a bit reminiscent of fungus, so it could be fungus. So I will want to put a drop of acetone on this outer edge here in case that retaining ring is held in place with lacquer, and then see if it'll come loose. Well, that retaining ring came out quite well. A drop of acetone certainly can't have hurt. I don't see any sign that was any lacquer on there, but it certainly can't have hurt. I can get a better indication of the interior surfaces here now. So I'll be able to clean this surface here that I can now get to, and look again at the mark that I could see that appeared to be on the rear surface, and either that's going to come off or it's not. If it's a leftover from excuse me, if it's left over from fungus, it may never come off. I don't think it's the fungus itself that etches into the glass. It's much more likely that the waste products of the metabolism of the fungus etch into the glass. Hold this again, I can still see a mark on that rear surface, so I'll clean that rear surface again now. And all I'm really hoping to achieve here is to get this lens in as good a condition as I can reasonably get it. I'm not in a position to repolish the lens or have it recoated or anything of that nature. That is for other people to do, and that's a very, very expensive process. Now those marks aren't going to come out. They're quite slight. They appear to be marks in the coating, and I don't believe that they will have any noticeable effect on image formation. Now this piece of glass, I'm looking now at the inner surface of the rearmost piece of glass, and I'm looking at those marks I could see earlier. And I'll see if they'll clean off. Just starting with one of them. Certainly the pattern is like fungus. That cleaned completely away. I just have one small patch there. It didn't go. Right, all those marks apart from a tiny patch at the periphery on one edge cleaned off very well. So I'm very pleased with that result. That's a good result. And I'll put that rear grip back together. just giving some last attention to this rear element. That looks fine. Make sure I've blown all the dust off it. It should drop into the mount. That's it. And the retaining ring. Of course, the retaining rings are quite thin in section. You have to be careful not to cross thread them or squeeze them and or distort them in any way, otherwise they will not go in. Typically I would use a toothpick to push the retainer ring around until it reaches the end of its travel. That seems very good. I'll just tighten that ring up. You don't want to over tighten the ring in a place like that. I have seen lens elements break after a retaining ring was over tightened, and the presumably there was a flaw in the glass or some foreign body under one edge of the lens element, which meant that it was under tension and the lens element just cracked straight across. It wasn't on a retina, it was on a 35mm Japanese SLR. Might have been a Casino. Yeah, those marks in that rear group are there to stay, but they shouldn't cause any problem. Now this front group should just unscrew. It does. This likewise can probably be disassembled. There's a little lock screw in this position. I would expect if I undo that lock screw I can turn the front mount right off there if I need to. First I'm going to check that if cleaning this inside innermost surface suffices, then I don't need to open it up. Yeah, the front surface is certainly not very good on this lens. I'll open it up and see if any of the imperfections are on the innermost surface, the inside surface of the front group, front element. So I'll just back off this little lock screw. And hopefully this will unscrew. Oh, it's moving, but it doesn't want to move. That lock screw may still be binding it. That's better. Okay. I've just got that front lens element sitting on a rubber friction tool here just as a handy support. I'm just looking at that innermost surface. To be honest, I don't see any marks on that. And I'm looking at the other component. And I'm judging from the reflections of the surfaces as to whether there's a problem on the surface. There doesn't appear to be. So it means that all of our problems with this lens element are on the front surface. They're there to stay. There'll be cleaning marks, deterioration of the surface of the glass from atmospheric contamination, perhaps stuff that's been splashed on it at some stage. But regardless of that, they're there to stay. If they don't come off with glass cleaner, they're not coming off. Just inspecting this surface again. I'll clean it just to ensure that I've cleaned as much as I can. That surface looks fine. It certainly has no fungus or obvious problems. Alright, I've just popped it back into the mount. And I'll screw the front retainer back over it. Do that up tight. Just do it up with your fingers, and there's no need for a tool. Do up the lock screw. And one last look at cleaning this front surface in case there are other marks there that will come off. No, that didn't shift in the slightest. They don't look like scratches, the patterns I'm seeing. They do more have the appearance of fungus or just deterioration of the coating. Particularly if this lens was used in conjunction with a lens hood, it may never give any problems. It's vastly improved from what it was to start off with. but I can still see surface marks on there. So I'll put the lenses to one side, get back to the shutter and tip out that front ring. That front ring is just a trim ring. It sits in here. It's below the height of this front lip. The lens binds up against that front lip, so that trim ring is not setting the height of the front lens group at all. I just rotate the retainer, the lock here on the front retainer ring. Rotate the retainer ring, it's a bayonet mount, and lift that off. Lift off the shutter speed cam down to the shutter. Can lift off the shutter release arm, and I'll look at this because I want to see if it's bent. It looks good. It's not uncommon for these to be bent, as people give them a wee twist with a pair of pliers to adjust the point at which the shutter releases. So I unhook the spring from the main lever. This part is called the main lever. I'll pull this component out. That lever can come out. That's got a strong return spring on it. This spring is the 1/500th of a second speed spring. And where are we? Right screwdriver for the job. This little latch holds the shutter in the cocked position. When the shutter is cocked, it's held in place with the single, small, countersunk, raised head screw. This is the B lever, holds the shutter open when set to B. That's held in place with a shoulder screw, and that shoulder screw should never be done up over tightened, because otherwise the shoulder bites into the aluminium of the mechanism plate and holds that lever tight so it does not move freely. Here's our flash sync contact, held by a single screw. We'll see if that wants to lift out of the body. The flash contacts are often pretty much wedged into the body, so be gentle about prying them up. It's just a plastic base that it's on. It'll break and leave you stranded. Alright, I'm going to remove this outer shutter case now. We don't need that on there. I'll just back off the two screws. That case should slide off, and it does. Just run that screw in slightly so I don't lose it. This does the click stops for our aperture. We're down to the core of the shutter itself really. 3 screws hold the outer case on, or the inner case in this case. The shutter case, 3 screws. Now the diaphragm on this one, the aperture is quite stiff. Almost certainly it's because of contamination on the blades. It doesn't take much oil to glue those blades together, make it very stiff to work. The diaphragm, so I'll just check that. Like, oh yeah, did you hear that click? That was as the blades popped. As I moved from one position to another, they're under tension and then they pop to their new position. That is a sign that the blades are very sticky, they're effectively stuck together. So that's our outer case. Here we have the mechanism plate with the shutter blades on it. They're not glued together with oil, which surprises me. There is some staining on them, however. That staining's a little bit unusual. It looks like something has dried on there, which normally means that moisture of some sort's been in the shutter. Right, I'll strip down the mechanism plate as far as I need to, which means unhook this spring. This is very stiff. This should be very free running. It's really gummed up, so the shutter couldn't run properly. This lever moves the blade actuating ring backwards and forwards, and that's very stiff in its action. The retainer is held by 3 screws. One or two of them will be longer than the others. Take note of which was the long screw. It's this one. Take the retainer off. There's the blade actuating ring. It looks a bit grimy, probably a bit of dried grease or dirt there. The mechanism plate's stripped down. I'm going to check the action of the retard gear train. That moves very freely, there's not a problem there. Here's our shutter case with that diaphragm in it. Now we have 2 screws that hold the setting lever to the internal mechanism. I can see them through a cutout in the retainer. I've got them positioned in the cutout. Earlier shutters didn't have that cutout. You had to put the setting lever in the case first and then assemble the diaphragm, which was more awkward. So this is certainly a convenience. That's 3 screws. That's loose. 3 screws hold the retainer plate here into the case. See if they're identical. Later shutters had a different, one screw was different. In some later shutters, one screw was a countersunk screw. These screws are all the same. And tip out those contents. Here we have the shutter case, completely empty, nothing in it, needs to be cleaned. This is the ring that actuates the diaphragm. That's the moving ring that's hooked up to the pointer, and that pulls the blades round on their pivots being in this retainer here. And the blades are all neatly stuck together in a nice rosette. And here, well, here's something a bit unusual. I'll zoom you right in. As you can see, some of these blades are notched away. Some of them are notched away in the middle. We've got 10 blades, 6 are notched and 4 are not notched. Now I haven't figured out the rhyme nor reason for that. Obviously notching those away achieved something for them. when they were manufacturing these. It's not great in terms of for the strength of these blades, because with a narrow little piece of metal left there, those blades could easily get very badly distorted in a situation where you had oil sticking the blades together. With 6 of one shape and 4 of the other, there's no way of interleaving them, one of one type, one of the next, to get back to the start and have them all in between each other evenly. So I'm blowed if I know what the idea of this was. If there'd been 5 of each, it would have seemed to make more sense to me, but they're usually in odd numbers like this. I've got no idea why it was done. The only thing that I can think of is that there was a thought that if by notching away the metal here that wasn't needed in the middle of the blade, that would reduce the drag on the blades as you swung them to open them and close the diaphragm. Whatever it wasn't done for a long period, and it's just one of life's mysteries, I'm sorry. So all of these components need to be cleaned. Once they're cleaned, I can reassemble the shutter, lubricate it appropriately, check the timing, and then that'll be the shutter ready to go back in the body. At the moment I have everything else cleaned. The rangefinder's been dealt with, that's in a good state now. All the other componentry's cleaned, apart from the components which are now waiting to go into the ultrasonic cleaner. First I'm going to do this shutter, then I'll put my components through the ultrasonic cleaner, then I will come back and assemble the entire camera. So far so good, the operation's going smoothly. I haven't found any disasters, no components that I'm going to have to scrabble through my toolboxes looking for a replacement for, with the single exception of that tripod socket, which is broken, but I'm fairly confident I'll be able to find one of those. Yeah, pretty confident. I know I replaced one on a camera fairly recently, but I'm sure I've got more than one spare lying around.